my friends, we're running into the middle of the increasing vortex that is this kind of transition into a new world. Mm-hmm. And things are accelerating all around us in many, many different dimensions. The whole business with Ukraine seems to be part of a larger strategy that the US and NATO have to seriously wound Russia. And then China, and it's become clear that they're already starting to go after China. And, that in and of itself is giant and has huge kind of implications for what might show up later downstream. Because here you force these two giant powers that have nuclear weapons to, solidify their relationship, and particularly as it is opposed to the West. And at the same time, you've got this multi-pronged approach to bring one way or the other to bring down the global economy. And the supply chain problems are increasing significantly. All these sanctions against Russia are kind of at some levels are boomeranging against the West and the United States. And there just seems to be a never-ending effort to just ratchet this up bigger in larger ways. It just, when you think that it's kind of settling down a little bit or something like that, they do another thing, and the European Union has now made it a law, passed a law that says that throughout all of Europe, starting in July, that you won't be able to go into, most major commercial environments without having a vaccine passport. And that's in all the European countries. And that means that you won't be able to fly into any of the European countries without a vaccine passport. And even though the whole thing is dropping down in terms of the number of so-called cases, this is, they're continuing to push this all over the place. They're doing it in Australia. The WHO is trying to make it global, and it supersedes all individual countries, the sovereignty of individual countries. At the same time, what you've got is these amazing kind of accelerating supply chain failures that have been laid off on this war in Ukraine, and the sanctions that are behind it. But it all started earlier than that. And there is, you've got the major governmental leaders, political leaders in Europe, who are all standing up and saying there's going to be problems with food and there's going to be food shortages. You've got our president, who has 3 times in the last 4 weeks said that there's going to be food shortages in the United States. And part of the problem is because they put sanctions on Russia, and Russia contributes something like 25% of all of the fertilizer that is used in agriculture around the world. And Ukraine has always been kind of the breadbasket of that part of the world and has produced a significant percentage, 15% sticks in my mind, of the kind of grains and other such things. And that, of course, has all been shut down. But if you look at the videos and some of the commentators that are kind of summarizing all of this, what you can see is that there is this is like the increasing wind coming from off the coast as the hurricane comes close, and you realize that the hurricane is coming your way because suddenly all this environmental stuff, the things that surround you, are starting to do things that they haven't done for a long time or don't usually do. And there are shortages in Sam's Club, shortages in Costco. This whole thing has extraordinary implications about how we live and how we deal with ourselves and our families and the rest of our society in the coming months. What's coming next, you won't be able to get out of the way of. What's coming next is this shortage of food, and it has amazing big implications for all of us, because none of us can, as we understand reality now, none of us can live without food. And so when it all starts to get, the shortages start to increase, it not only has a direct effect on kind of our lifestyle, but it also starts to raise kind of existential issues, because now for the first time, you're confronted with the possibility that you may not be able to get the food that you need in order to sustain yourself and your family and those who you love. And to my way of thinking, this is not just a byproduct of some of the other things that we've talked about, but it is a part of the strategy, the strategic kind of thrust of what's going on here. What they are trying to do is essentially use famines and food shortages as a major kind of effort to, again, get control over people, over the populace. Martin Armstrong says, the talk behind the curtain is that Biden will require a digital ID when he implements food rationing as part of our necessary war against Putin. So it becomes a technique. It becomes a device that they line up and train in order to accomplish what they're doing. I promise you that this is planned. This has lots of kind of fundamental earmarks of being an orchestrated kind of effort that is part of a multidimensional one, all coming in to try to squeeze us. Marty Armstrong says, our computer targeted Ukraine as the spot where it would begin back in 2013, his computer told us. I wish these things were just my opinion, for there would be a 50-50 chance that I'm wrong. But he says, we've crossed the Rubicon, the point of no return. Our model for the decline and fall of the United States we published back in 1985 was that it would begin cyclically with the 46th president. So what you've got is, just a couple of the data points here that I put together. Germany is reporting the highest inflation in a generation, with the CPI rising at 7.6 annual rate. And Germany is going to take a step toward a return of the dreaded Weimar hyperinflation when, according to the German Retail Association, consumers should prepare for another wave of price hikes for everything, for everyday goods and groceries, that prices at German retail chains will explode between 20 and 50% in the next week or two. And so this raises, like I say, some very kind of profound, kind of personal questions for all of us. Because number one, you have to, as I said, figure out how do we sustain ourselves in the kind of the short and midterm. But more than that, what you know from history is that the kind of principal thing that generates revolutions and uprisings in countries is famines. It's almost guaranteed that if you squeeze people enough in terms of food, they finally get the word and say that we're not going to do this anymore. And that's, let them eat cake kind of thing. They finally say, no, there is no cake, and we're going to come and get yours or something. And so what you have here is not only an initiative, a vector, a force that is going to kind of affect us all where we live in one way or another, but also is an indicator of what we would call in the futures business a weak signal or an early indicator. This isn't very weak, but it is kind of an early indicator of an impending scenario, or a future that's coming downstream. And that is, of course, that this, along with maybe, like I say, the COVID vaccine things, passports, and the other kind of issues that we're familiar with are all clearly pointing toward this global civil war business that Martin Armstrong says his computer says happened between 2025 and 2027. So it's one thing to think about the global civil war in 3 years, kind of out there far enough that it's not clear and there's not much you can do about it and so on. But it's something else when you suddenly start to say that dramatic food shortages are going to start to show up in the coming weeks and months. And so you've kind of got to A near term and a long term kind of situation, right? The near term one is how to sustain yourself. The longer term one is where is this going? Because this is a broad based, this is not a localized issue. This is all over the place. And it clearly is going to turn into famines in some places, shortages everywhere. And that will have a very significant kind of galvanizing effect to bringing people together and, in a common kind of perspective on where they're going. And so the kind of near-term question is how do you deal with your situation? If you found that helpful and interesting, and you haven't done so already, why don't you just click on the link below and give us your email so that we can send you alerts for the next segments of PostScript. We'd love to be able to tell you beforehand when things are coming downstream so you don't have to go look for them. And this is the best way to do that. We assure you that we won't share your information with anyone else. Thanks.